I'm your host, Laura Mignot. This is one of my amazing 29 Days of Magic podcasts, where every day Black History Month, I interview a really dope Black women. And today I am so excited to have Lola Bakare, who is an author and CMO advisor. She has a phenomenal career, and it's going to be a great conversation. So take a listen. Hey, Lola.
Hi, Laura. It's so great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
I am delighted to have you on the show. And be part of the 29 Days of Magic. So great to have you.
I mean, magic, and that's one of that's one of the key parts of my platform. So feels like such a great fit.
And the perfect fit. So I know you've listened to the podcast, so you know that the first question is always the same. And I'm very curious to hear what your answer is going to be. So Lola, what was your first job?
Oh, you're gonna love this one. Well, okay. I'm gonna give you my first job post undergrad.
Whichever you want. It can be in high school, it can be school, it can be undergrad, whatever you want.
I'll be a Gemini, and I'll go for two then, because the first one I think is interesting. My first ever job was a summer job at a bagel shop in my hometown of Harrisburg, PA. Working behind the counter, that sort of thing. Being raised in a Nigerian family, my dad thought I should be studying over the summer. He really didn't understand why I wanted to have a job, but I just had this romantic idea in my head of a summer job, until they asked me to clean the bathroom. And that was kind of when the interest in doing that sort of work faded away. So I was more interested in the romantic ideal than what actually has to happen on the front line. So we'll put a pin in that, because that probably goes back to some of the themes we could talk about in the grown-up career part of my life. So fast forward, after graduating from University of Pennsylvania, where I was an English major, I went to go work at PepsiCo QTG in Chicago as a marketing associate on the Gatorade brand. Pretty much the coolest first job possible, imaginable. And a really lucky moment, because I didn't study a lick of marketing in college. They hired me based on, I think, personality fit and potential. And I had a wonderful experience there.
Wow. Okay, so you just strolled into Pepsi.
Sometimes you find yourself in the right place at the right time, and I credit a lot of my experiences to that, but then being ready to take advantage of it. So I had a friend, my friend Alpha, if she's listening to this, she was a history major, I was English. And in the fall of senior year, she said to me, what are we going to do next year? We need jobs. Like, are you doing any on-campus recruiting? And I wasn't even in that headspace or in that vibe. The Wharton students going to all their interviews and wearing their suits and all of that. But she told me that there were cocktail parties where you got to meet the people who were coming to recruit. So that was kind of what piqued my interest. And one of the first ones I went to was the PepsiCo QTG presentation. At that time, not sure if they still do, they recruited a few undergrads to train with the MBA class from, at that time, it was Dartmouth and Penn. And so right place, right time, probably not something that the Wharton marketing students who'd been studying for 4 years and would have really loved to have a marketing job, probably not something they were thrilled about that I grabbed the one slot available, but in a sort of survivor-like interview process, I ended up being the one that got the offer. And it was a great honor. And wow, I got to train with some people who are even today doing amazing things, like Morgan Flatley, for example. She was a marketing manager at that time when I was there as an associate. Now she's CMO globally of McDonald's. Kenny Mitchell, CMO of Snap, he actually wrote my business school recommendations. That's sort of how close we were at that time. And it was just the most amazing formative experience as a marketer. But those sort of name dropping things aside, the crux of what makes working at Pepsi so special is that nowhere else trains you so sort of systematically. It's such a part of the process to have these formal class style training program, training sort of modules and approaches as you're doing your job. And then they let you do the work from day one. I was in front of rooms that no 22-year-old who studied English and didn't know anything about marketing probably should have been presenting and learning how to do it on the job, on the fly, without any sort of, dress rehearsal. It was, we hired you because you're smart and now you're going to do this and we're going to help you get better at it, but we're not going to wait till you're ready to put you on stage. And that was everything.
Wow, it's incredible. And it's the kind of it's also the fact that like yeah, those folks might have been studying marketing, but they didn't have what you had, which was a degree of awesomeness that folks could see as potential even at that moment.
Yeah, I mean, and thank you for saying that, but it's true. The other part of it was just an obsession with pop culture.
Yep,
I probably
comes in
discount
handy.
how much that had to do with it. I've always been someone who reads, watches, and listens to everything,
Same.
and is curious about what goes on behind said things. So I think that curiosity and engagement in what's going on in the world from a pop culture standpoint was part of the appeal.
Well,
And I think young
yeah.
marketers need to get engaged in what's going on.
Well, it's what we were saying earlier about like you have to be aware of what's going on, be aware of what's around you right now. Like you can't pretend like you can only look at spreadsheets. You have to actually be like, okay, what is going on these days? What is none talk? Like why is XYZ so much more interesting right now? Why does Dapper Dan have a collaboration with Puma? Like that
Hmm.
stuff you should be paying attention to.
Yes. What was it you
Um,
said before about stats aren't, what was that?
oh, I can't remember now.
It's
Um,
awesome about
you
like,
know, the stats can't, something about around the lines of like stats aren't um the stats aren't the only thing. Like
yeah.
they are one of the things, but they're not the only thing. And I think if you continue to only look at that as your measurement, you'll never actually be able to tap into culture effectively. And I think if you from day one, I think similar in my success, it's just like I've been paying attention.
Mm.
Like, what is interesting, what is cool, what's been happening, and you don't have to put an age gate on that. Like,
Well, and let's talk about your 29 days of magic with Black women. One of my hypotheses, I haven't done the academic research to prove it out, but I do truly believe that because we've had to walk through the world adapting to our surroundings constantly, especially anybody who grew up in an environment that wasn't predominantly Black or it wasn't always predominantly Black, you are forced to a state of hyper awareness just for your comfort and sometimes physical safety, for me, emotional safety. You're constantly looking around and trying to modulate your behavior to make sure you can, quite frankly, growing up, fit in where you
yeah,
were. And as taxing as that is, it also builds a muscle and a skill set that makes for a very effective and astute marketer.
yeah, because you could actually understand the world that you're looking in without your own views or prejudices affecting it. Like
Exactly.
you sort of are inside, but you're outside. And I
Yes.
think that's a fascinating way. That's a really fascinating way to look at it. It allows you
Mhm.
a different
Sorry.
way to look at the world.
Absolutely. I mean, I wrote something in an Adweek piece that came out today about cultural literacy and ad education. And one of the lines that I recall is so relevant to this. It's that we have a skill of being able to decenter our lived experience in terms of how we view any particular situation. And if you can't do that, you can't be a great marketer. But a lot of people think that that's what they're doing when they're not. I'll leave it at that.
Well, I think you're right. I think it is so much like you can walk into the room and either not be the center of attention or not. If you want to be the person who's just the observer, like oftentimes I am the observer, and figure out what the state of play is, and then adapt to that particular moment, and then keep it moving. And I think, as from a marketing standpoint, like being able to be, the fierce urgency of now is real. And I
Mm.
think the folks who have been able to last a very long time in our industry have always been going one, two, three, four more times ahead. Like they get it. And whether they're 25 or they're 55, like how come all these sort of older folks are still killing game advertising? Because they never stop paying attention to the world around
Exactly.
them. Doesn't mean
Exactly.
they have to be at a club where all the Gen Z folks are, but you know what? They might talk to their Gen Z daughter or son
Exactly.
and be like, "Hey, what's going on here? Like, what would you guys want to see in here?" And I think it's also the ability to like want to hear from other perspectives as opposed to dropping your perspective on every single thing. When you do that,
Yes. 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 Yes.
like that makes you a better marketer every day of the week. What you can't just assume that like, oh, because I look at all these stats and that's going to be the way it has to be. Like that's you know
Well, you won't find your strategy in a spreadsheet, that's for sure.
no, you won't. Like
You
you could
might
try.
find something to inform it. You might find something to sell it in, but you're not going to find it. So,
You won't. So you had this amazing job at Pepsi,
yes.
and now you're here as an amazing CMO advisor and author. So what was that journey like from those early days of Pepsi till now?
Oh, I mean, it was such an interesting one because, like many Geminis, I've never been one to have a linear or predictable path. So the surprise of going into marketing to begin with, that was just the first of many surprises. Like I mentioned, I decided to go back to business school because I did want that sort of more foundational business grounding, but also I wanted a couple of years to really think about where I wanted to be, what I wanted to do. And at that time, I had this vision of doing what I did for CPG, which was so much fun. But like, what if I could do that in an industry where the product is something I myself as a consumer am crazy passionate about? Like I think Gatorade's amazing and I can get excited about marketing it, but I love books and I love media. So what would it look like to be a marketer in that world? And so that was why I chose Stern for the media entertainment program. When I left there, I did the thing that often happens. Instead of waiting for the probably lower paying and harder to get job at Penguin Random House or whatever it would be that fit with my exact vision, I convinced myself that going into tech was kind of similar to entertainment because people access entertainment through their devices.
There
We're
you
all
go.
marketers here, right? I marketed that to myself and I went to Dell and did their MBA, rotational program down in Austin, Texas. I also saw a lot of appeal to moving there. So I'm one of those people who kind of loves to move around and live in different.
Love Austin.
Austin's awesome. So I had a great experience at Dell, but then the opportunity to finally do marketing in the world of media and publishing did surface. So there's a small new startup in Austin called the Daily Dot. I was hired there to be their first director of marketing, hire a couple people under me, audience acquisition, a data analysis and strategist. And our job was to grow readership for the Daily Dot and grow awareness for the B2B brand. So that was a hugely impactful learning experience on so many levels that we can talk about. Um, what ended up making me decide to leave and go independent was the realization, and unfortunately, it's one that so many women and black men, basically everybody who's not a white man, cisgender white male, has, is that when you're in an environment where there's not a value alignment, where there isn't value alignment, and where there isn't a shared empathy for people who are from historically excluded backgrounds, no matter how great everything else is, it's really hard to feel grounded in, just almost sort of the, um, how do I even put it? It's hard to feel grounded in the security of the environment that you're in. It's hard to feel safe, quite frankly. That's really what it comes down to.
Yeah.
And so I needed to remove myself from a situation where I didn't feel safe, and I did, and I never looked back. I learned so much that allowed me to become an independent consultant, and I can't even believe it, but it's been 7 years and counting since I've been in-house, and I've just had some of the most amazing experiences from day one. And a lot of my clients I can't talk about because they're very private, But one of the things I remind people who are going out on that journey of becoming a service-based entrepreneur independently is the way you get your foot in the door is who you've worked with before. So that's always been my entire strategy. It's like, go help the people who you worked with at whatever other place, and we'll see what comes from there. So that led to this world where, and I guess rewinding a little bit, Laura, I did a chief of staff role at Dell for an amazing woman named Lauren Kelly, who actually also grew up at Pepsi. We knew each other there, didn't work together. But in that chief of staff role, that's where I kind of started to realize, wait a minute, I'm really good at this sort of like whisper role. Like,
Mm-hmm.
no, here's what we should do. Okay, like you're going to go in the meeting. Here are the bullet points. Oh, that person's not able to like figure out the thing. I'll go work with them. So I helped her as her right hand in that role when she was leading the commercial strategy organization at Dell from a B2B standpoint. And that was the beginning of thinking of figuring out how I could take that just maybe innate passion or innate talent in advising, in sort of being that, whether it's a coach or a thought partner to senior level marketing executives. It became the thing that I didn't have to raise my hand for. People came to me, and that just continues to sort of mushroom and from the to the to this day, and it's really exciting.
Fantastic. I love it. And I mean, there's so many lessons in there. It's like one, being in the room. It's two, making sure that you become indispensable.
Mm,
Three, the quality of becoming a whisperer. But at the end of the day, a whisperer is just an attentive listener. Like
absolutely.
you learn, you
Also,
hear what folks are saying and what folks are not saying, and then you synthesize.
yes. And this is when you're surrounded by the right leaders and mentors. And I'm really grateful for this, but I figured out that superpower because people told me I had it before I even knew. Lauren was the biggest influence along those lines. But there were others. I'll never forget Farrah Howard was at Dell when I was there. I don't even remember her exact role, but she was like one of the bosses. She's at GoDaddy now, CMO. And once when we were rotating roles, she said to me, Lola, you're so smart, but we just don't know where to put you. And at the time, that was a really hard thing to hear. But what I take away from it now is that it's because that job didn't exist.
Hmm.
I had to create it, and so now I have.
Well, that's the thing I think is really important. That I say this to a lot of good friends of mine right now who are kind of in similar modes, like, okay, what is the thing I need to do next? And I'm like, create your own job because
You can
you're
do that,
awesome
by
at
the way, while you're still a full-time employee.
you can 100% do that while you're a full-time employee. Like it's something like, don't take a check for no check. But I think it's so important that folks realize that you can craft and create the job that you actually want to do. Because when you actually do, then you're actually happier. Like it fills you up in a different way. You get more excited to do that work. You love the new challenge.
Mm,
But figuring out what that next job is it takes the time to sort of take a step back and remember. I always say to folks, what are you awesome at? What do
yes.
people tell you you're awesome at?
Hmm.
Those are your superpowers.
Yes.
And if you
I would add a
really sit
third
with
thing to
that,
that, Laura. I would say what actually energizes you to do. What do you
hmm
do? Because you can be awesome at a thing and it can drain you. I'll give you my example, and that's copywriting. I'm not a trained copywriter, but I'm pretty good at it. And I can be the one that does the copy in a situation where there isn't a copywriter available. In the beginning of my consulting career, that got leaned into because it is really hard to find good writers. But what I realized, after just kind of sucking it up and saying yes to those types of projects more than I probably should have, is that, wow, a writing project will drain me. A messaging project, strategy, sort of the internal piece, the briefing, the creative, great. But when I try to do both sides, it does not feel energizing. So even though I can do it, I probably shouldn't. And I like to encourage people to think about, it's almost like which of your superpowers is scalable.
yeah, what I always sort of preface those two questions by saying, what makes you happy to get out of bed every morning?
Mm,
Like, what once you want to run to your laptop and open it?
absolutely.
Because and so once you say that, then it's like, okay, what are you really awesome at? Because those two pieces come together.
Mm,
Because if you are not excited about that, then you in actuality, you're really good at it. You're not awesome.
yes.
And folks know you're awesome at that thing because not only do you deliver that thing, you deliver it with joy.
Yes.
That's why I always say awesome, not great. It's like I deliberately built that questionnaire whenever I do a workshop around that language because when I say awesome, what do? You automatically smile. You're not like, oh, I'm really good at, like, oh, because I can focus in on, like, because what I'm trying to get at for folks is that, like, the stuff that makes you smile, the stuff that gives you energy, that's what you're awesome at. You can be great at, like, doing that killer copy, but you're not going to become awesome at that. You're never going to say you're an awesome copywriter. And yeah, I'm a good copywriter.
Yeah.
But when
I
I say what's
love that.
awesome, yeah,
I really do. And I think it's part of why, if we look at the unique experience of the, call it, I don't even know how you would classify it. There are a lot of professional Black women. There are different ways you can be a professional Black woman. There's the experience that someone has in a shift job. And by the way, we don't talk about how we can advocate for that side of the workforce more because they really need our help. But then there's the sort of, executive experience of a Black woman. And I think sometimes the challenge of being able to do so many things well can be a curse. And why are we able to do so many things well? Well, it's because we've always kind of had to be noticed at all. And so I think it's even harder for us sometimes to recognize the superpower because we're used to just figuring out how to do whatever it is that needs to be done.
yeah, it's true. I think it really is that, like, what needs to get done because if you give it to black women, it'll get done. Versus, like, all right, you know what? I got this. Let's roll.
Yep, yep.
Big difference. So I think for you, so along the way, what do you think was a challenge you had along the way? You were like, there's no way I'm getting through this, and then you did.
Ooh, that's such a good question. Hmm. Gosh, there's so many. Well,
Yeah.
if we go back to my experience, at the startup I mentioned, there was a very emotionally taxing lack of alignment, between myself and a peer. It was the whole sort of marketing PR lead thing that can be tricky to begin with, but it's even trickier when I'm just going to say it frankly, work ethic sort of
Different.
values. Yeah. I'm like, how does
I
this
love how you're being. I love how you're being so
I'm
tactful.
trying to be diplomatic, but like, yeah, I mean, when for me, the way I was raised in the jobs that I did, if if it's Friday night and one of our reporters is asked to go on, MSNBC and they need some help sort of prepping, like you got to take the call. But I'm in a world now where it's sort of like you need to respect my boundaries no matter what. And I get that, but at the end of the day, it's like we got to get this done. So it turned into a very challenging struggle of will slash emotion being leveraged as a weapon. We talk about the white women tears thing a lot. That happened a lot in that situation where the dynamic became, Lola, keep doing the work because we need you to do it, but figure out how to do it in a way that doesn't upset her, because we don't want to hear her coming to us crying. So you need to not make her cry. It's not the right thing needs to happen. It's we need
Don't make
to
her cry.
make sure she's okay so that no one is bothered by these outbursts. And that was a very difficult one to get through because to that point, I'd always, I guess, been lucky to have experiences where at some level it is about a meritocracy. If you do the best work, you are rewarded and everybody's happy. Not so in this situation. In fact, the inverse could be true. If you do too much of the best work, you're going to upset someone who is sensitive about it because before they were doing whatever they wanted and then they hired you. Well, then we have to ask ourselves, well, why did you hire me? Oh, you hired me because this thing wasn't working out and you didn't want to deal with it. So that navigating the dynamics of an underperforming peer who blames you for how unhappy they are in their job because you're doing well in yours. That I couldn't have anticipated that. I didn't have the tools to deal with it. I think I was 29 at the time. I was also the only Black woman, the youngest, and the only person with an MBA on the entire executive team. And it got to a place where I felt very isolated. That place where whenever you're with your friends, it's the only thing you complain about. They get tired of hearing about it.
Yeah.
And it gets pretty dark. I'm not gonna lie.
Mm-hmm.
There was one moment where I was disinvited from the board meetings because I said something that the owner didn't agree with. And so it's sort of like the head of marketing is the only head of department that's not invited to board meetings. So that was the level of, now how did I get out of it? I took myself out of it. I was lucky enough to be in a situation where I'd started getting calls for advice, and those turned into offers to consult. So when I left, I already had made up my income that I was, making there and then some, and went into a long-term engagement that I'm still with an anchor client that I'm still with to this day. So it was a lucky exit, but moral of the story is there are times when the only way out is to leave. So leave.
I love that. And thank you for saying that. Been there, did the exact same thing. Because there's nothing you can do.
There really isn't. And that's so for what I wish I would have known is that I thought, well, if I just succeed even more, if I grow our traffic even more, if I get our ad spend down for bigger results even more, then I'll just say it. Let's be honest. They'll like me.
Mm-hmm.
No, they won't.
Well, there's a really great TikTok I saw yesterday, and it was about this exact thing, and it was all about white women's internalized racism, and like they didn't, and it was how like she didn't realize that she had internalized racism until she actually did the work, because she couldn't understand why her coworker was just doing way better than her, always had better results, better kudos, like just killing the game better, and she couldn't put her finger on as to why that upset her, because she's like, they were friendly, the girl hadn't done anything to her, it was not personally affecting her success was not personally affecting her detrimentally, but she was like, oh yeah, no, but deep down it pissed me off that she was doing better than me.
That's the long and short of it right there.
And that's what it was. And it was the first time I've ever actually seen someone who's white actually articulate that, because I think every Black woman in business has come across somebody just like that. I don't care what industry you're in, you have met someone who just is so annoyed by your success.
Literally, your success, your existence.
Your sheer existence. I mean, if you want to be really pop culture moment, this is the Meghan Markle,
oh, absolutely,
Princess Kate thing. This is literally what it is. Like, she didn't do nothing to you, girl, but she got her own job, she got her own money, she got her man, but she's not doing anything to you.
Deeper than that, because like we talked about, I'm a pop culture fan, so of course I've listened to Spare in its entirety and even repeated a few chapters. Oh my God, Laura, I'm like, can we actually be friends now? Not just Twitter friends.
We can totally be friends. Of course.
Okay, so you're with me on this. Let's get into it. The effect of you're doing too well, and I don't like that. That started in the dynamic between Prince Charles, Camilla,
and Meghan. And Diana.
Like that she and Harry were getting such great press. So they had to change it.
They had to change it. They had to change it. But it was there is it's interesting how it's so clearly articulated in this book and in what we're seeing with our eyes right now online. But it is in every you see that in so many places. Like you're just not a good fit. I don't know what it is about you, but I just don't think you're a good fit. Like we've all heard that.
And that was
And
what he decided, day one, the person I was working for at this company, down to the fact that my mentor, who I mentioned, Lauren, who gave my referral when I was starting the job, what she didn't tell me, but then told me later after I decided to leave, because I was so excited. She didn't want to burst my bubble, I'm sure, was that he asked her, well, she's great, but how do you get her to tone it down? And like that is a very telling question.
well, yeah, it's like you have too much energy, or you smile too much, or you seem too happy. I mean, I've
He's
heard
always
them
making a
all.
fuss. Well, you're always making a fuss.
Like,
Stop
why is
making.
it always about this? Like, oh, but you've seen it and the coded language. And I said again, I really appreciate. I kind of almost want someone to like stick that, like kind of like the no Martin Luther the thesis where they stick it on the wall so everyone can see it. Like I feel like that TikTok should really be taught in schools that aren't in Florida because apparently you can't teach about racism there anymore.
Thank you.
But like that is something that if more folks just acknowledge, we'd be a long way off.
They would
To
get
a
you should
better
share it
place.
on LinkedIn. Tag me.
Because like that's the thing I feel like is so necessary for folks to understand that like because I can't tell you, I'm sure you have this so similar you have lots of girlfriends who just feel like, I don't know what it is, but this mediocre blah 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 is just up a wall about my sheer existence.
Yep. Oh, I mean, one of the quotes, and I'll say the quote because I'm not going to name the individual, but it was one of the complaints about me was because of Lola's intensity. Like, so essentially because of how much I am into the work, which I think is the goal, I'm having to see my therapist more often.
Oh
So
my God.
my intensity had a negative impact on her mental health, which is totally fine. The only line crosses, that's not anything for me to do anything about.
And also your therapist would have told you that, darling.
Well, it depends on the
There's
therapist.
that. There's
But
that. Like,
I
let's be
mean,
real. If you were
you make
really
that
going to
complaint to can you
therapy,
imagine one of us making that complaint to a CEO that someone
I would have honestly, I would have found a way to fire you on the spot if you brought that to my attention. I'm like, you know what? Bye.
and then but what actually happened was I was sat down and told that I needed to figure out how to make her more comfortable.
Yeah. Oh, I had the same conversation with someone.
Yeah. So
I many years ago when I worked for a smaller boutique agency, I had a similar conversation. And I was like, what is it about me that she doesn't like? Oh, I can't really tell you. I was like, well, then how am I ever gonna like figure out a way to work with her if you don't tell me? I'm not a mind reader. Like I think I made a little joke. Like, I'm not Miss Cleo. Like I don't know if there is something that I have done, if I have said something to her that maybe came off in the wrong way. I apologize for it, but I kind of need to know what that is.
mhm.
Like it's just like maybe you're just not a fit with her, and I'm like, that's not an excuse.
And can you imagine talking about two humans that way?
Like
It's like who
the
decides who has to be a fit with whom?
It's like we're not
Who's
dating.
not fit
Like
with her?
I work with you. Like we're not. It's like if you're not fit, it's like we're in a relationship. And okay, cool. Like we're no longer going to be in a relationship. Cool. But we're work colleagues.
Yeah, like the
That
job is to figure out how to fit.
yeah. Like
And we
because
can't be the only ones always doing that.
yeah. But we're always the ones who are the one have to sort of find a way to sort of shrink ourselves into the tiniest possible bubble so that someone else for somebody else's comfort. And
I'll give you one more example, Laura, on this that I think everyone listening will just get. And maybe even those who, if anyone's listening who's not convinced that what we're talking about is true, that there have been situations in every, I hate the term person of color, but I want to be inclusive here of not just the Black experience. I would say every historically excluded experience they're not the same, but they have this through line. People will actually do things out of their self-interest in order to exclude us. So a perfect example of that was when I was able to get that company a meeting with the team at Gatorade for an ad sales pitch. We're a publication, that's how you keep the lights on. And wouldn't it make sense for me to go? They didn't take me up to the meeting in Chicago.
Why would they do that? No, of course not.
It's like, you don't even want the money if I helped you get it. Wow.
No, I have seen so many things along in with friends, with my own personal experiences, where I'm just like, do you realize how remarkably short-sighted you are? Because it's going to cost you a lot of money for not doing the simplest thing here. All because you want to make somebody else feel comfy or have them get the win.
Yep.
Like that one needs a win. So.
Or you want to humble somebody.
Like, well, the idea of humbling someone is just so atrocious.
Mm-hmm.
It's just like, I'm sorry, what? No. As I said, I think folks, I was on a panel recently and I was talking about like all of the challenges you have when you are a leader and what it means to sort of not impart your trauma upon the next generation. And so you were extra mindful about how you approach situations so that you don't make those same mistakes. And I thought to myself, how many of those folks who can actually understand that that's what the work you actually have to do. Like you actually have to be like, yeah, this is insanity.
But yeah, so no, I'm glad we delved into some of that tough stuff because the goal is for whoever's in that situation right now, hopefully who's listening, to know that you're not alone and it's not you.
It's not you. It's not you. But there, I think you and I both being successful and thriving are shining examples that you can get through it. And that there is always better on the other side.
Right.
Exactly. But it's also not solved by ourselves. It's mentors, it's coaches, it's therapy if necessary. It takes that you have to take those steps because that is a lot to deal with, and that systematic breaking you down can be heartbreaking and troublesome. And you have to be able to reach out to folks to hopefully help you so that you're in a good place.
Absolutely.
It's traumatic.
For me, Laura, one of the keys to building back up, literally the entire list you mentioned, those things were all involved in getting to that point of what I'm going to go ahead and call self-actualization. Even throughout my journey as an independent consultant, there were phases of that. Like I talked about, making sure I'm working on the right projects, that sort of thing. But then the kicker for me, it all came full circle, was creativity and having an outlet, writing, speaking, and having my own voice. For me, that is a self-care mechanism.
So I love how you just segued into my next commercial. So since you just said that, Lola, what is it you actually do for your self-care?
Well, it's interesting. I've never thought about it this way, but I would break it down by intellectual and physical. And my intellectual self-care is absolutely expression. It's funny. I don't know if you remember that Jackson 5 movie, but there's this one scene where Michael is talking to his mother and he's kind of distraught. And he's like, maybe he's having a moment where he's not sure what to do next. And he says, I've got so many songs in my head and I can't get them out. Like that.
Yep, I remember this.
It's just right. It stands out. And for years, that's where I was like, it's like, I need to be, but I don't know how to. But I can't be okay unless I'm expressing. And so having gotten to the other side of that and found a platform that works for me, it's primarily LinkedIn, but then a lot of it is writing, doing things like this, like that lights me up. And so intellectually, that's huge. The other part, morning pages, a lot of people do that practice. I'm not religious about it as much as I probably should, but when I do get into a groove of doing morning pages every day, which if you're not familiar is writing 3 freehand stream of consciousness pages in your journal the minute you wake up.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
the minute you wake
Right.
up. You never heard of this? Oh my gosh, you gotta
No.
read The Artist's Way. The
Oh,
Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. It's groundbreaking, it's game changing, and it's the day that you'll have after having done that, you wouldn't believe it. So that's a huge one. That's a huge tool. Even working on the book I'm working on now, like the days that I get the most writing done are the days that I did morning pages. Funny enough, more writing, but
more
also
writing actually
never
yields
go back.
better writing.
Pardon me?
More writing yields better writing.
Exactly. And I think that's true too. So just being in that place of not being blocked in terms of expression is huge. And then from a physical standpoint, it's, how do I put this? Being pampered. I love to get my nails done. I love to get massages. You know what I
Same.
mean? Like all of those things that are indulgence. I should probably be more habitual about my exercise, but when I am, I know that clarifies my mind as well. 20 minutes on the elliptical will, you'll feel like you got your brain massaged, not even to talk of like the benefits to the body. So there's the sort of movement aspect of it. That's the sort of task of self-care. And then there's also this sort of allowing yourself to be catered to be, allowing yourself to not be the one doing. I think that's a lot of the appeal of things like, getting your pedicure, getting your massage, or whatever it is. So
Yes,
I,
it
I,
is
I
very much that. The act of somebody else doing that for you. It's funny, like when during the pandemic, obviously I could not get my manicures and pedicures, and I got like the really nice kits to kind of do it at home. I got like the chill house nails, which was like the stickable manicures. And after like doing it like 2 or 3 times, I was like, yeah. No,
it's
I
just not.
actually like the whole act of like going to get my nails done, like sitting for an hour and like just chilling out, and it not me doing the work.
Mhm.
Like it means so much to not do the work.
Yep,
It's
100%.
like it's just so important.
Well, and that's why it's why, and I live alone, but I still have a housekeeper who
Hmm.
comes in whenever I want a thorough deep cleaning, and maybe that's once every 2 weeks, maybe it's once a week if I'm really busy, so getting people to help and not feeling ashamed of that is also a huge self-care mechanism, for me, and I want that for more Black women especially. I think sometimes we have a hard time saying yes to that sort of thing, but we deserve it, so why not?
Yeah,
um
let it
you know
go. Like I think that sometimes it's just where there's this makeup and like, oh well, why would I have to get a housekeeper? Like blah 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 blah. It's like because you want to get a housekeeper. That's it. There is no why. Are you busy and do you have time to do your cleaning? Would it make your life easier if you didn't have to worry about that one thing on your list? Then do it.
yep.
Figure out how to make it work.
And like I always say, it's always good to stimulate the economy by giving other people work to do that you're paying
Yeah.
for.
It's like why choose
The last
well?
one where I want to mention, because if you follow me on social media, you probably realize that I talk a lot about whatever show I'm watching or book I'm reading, and that's another key too. So for me, watching whatever it is on Netflix or wherever, listening to my Audible, listening to that podcast, whatever it is, that those are really important self-care activities for me that also double as quite frankly beneficial towards the work that we do as marketers. So I feel really blessed to be in a place where the things I like to do also make me better at what I do for work.
They absolutely
And
do.
that's I don't know how it gets any better than that. I can't imagine a life where the thing you do for work is something you don't want to think about anymore when you leave. I don't even know what that would be like.
I think that's such a great point. And wow, I mean, there's so many great points, Lola. Oh my goodness.
Sorry.
No, it's exactly why you're here, my darling. But there's so much there, and I think folks would be wise to take your excellent and sage advice, especially about like knowing again. Vegging out and watching Netflix actually comes in handy. If for no other reason, guess how you ice break a conversation? Have you watched Kaleidoscope? Have you watched
By the
Wednesday?
way, have you? Because it was so good.
Yes, of course.
Oh my gosh.
I've seen Glass Onion like 5 times at this point.
Should I watch
Um,
it? Okay, I've been on the fence. And I'm like, I don't know if I'd like this.
we'll talk after this.
Okay. We'll talk about
I'll
it.
give you a reason why you should like it. Um, just my opinion, of course. Last question for you. Do you have a give and or an ask of the audience?
Oh, do I have an ask? But first I'm gonna go with the give. Um, I am always available. I'm going to be very specific about this, okay? Because I have had to pull back from taking every one-on-one that's requested. But what I'm always available for is a DM of a very dialed in question. I will answer it. Now, if you ask me how I became who I am today, no, I'm not going to write an article in the DMs for you. But if you have a question, anyone listening that is specific and pointed, you may DM it to me and I will answer you. And I don't say that obviously on all podcasts or anything I go on. It's specifically because, Laura, I know your audience is an audience that I want to lift up. So I'm offering that with an open heart. And the ask is, if you so choose, please do follow me on LinkedIn. It's my main social media platform where I'm every day kind of sharing my thoughts about whatever it is I'm thinking about. And if you really want to double down, buy the book, Responsible Marketing, How to Create an Authentic and Inclusive Marketing Strategy. It comes out this coming July.
Fantastic. We'll be sure to put all your details in the show notes. Buy her book. Buy her book. I might be quoted in that book, so there's
He is going to be quoted in the book.
um, shameless plug. But Lola, oh my gosh, it's just been such a delight having you on the podcast, which I knew it would be. And she is right about the DM because I DM'd her and she got right back to me.
Now, if you email me, listen, it's a war zone in there, so I can't. But the DMs, that's where you're more likely to get a response.
Awesome. Thank you so very much. And I'm so honored that you were part of 29 Days of Magic. And so keep listening through all this.
I have to say, thank you for doing this. And thank you for your example and your vision and showing us that there's so much that is possible. I admire everything that you've done and are doing and can't wait to continue to be pals.
Awesome. Likewise. Thank you so much. And that is our show.